Let's get started with our panel this evening. Can the UPA survive the 2G storm? This on a day when the Prime Minister has accused the opposition of trying to engineer and force a midterm poll. Let's introduce our panel this evening. Subramanian Swamy. He's been, of course, the key person in this entire case who's petitioning in the court asking that Mr. Chidambaram's role be probed in this. Also with us, Nirmala Sitharaman. She's a BJP leader, spokesperson for the party as well. Also with us in the studio, Sushil Kumar, lawyer for former Telecom Minister A. Raja. Also joining us, KTS Tulsi. He's representing Sanjay Chandra of Unitech in this case. Also joining us, Dushyant Dave, senior advocate with the Supreme Court. Let me start with you, Subramanian Swamy. The CBI says in court there's absolutely no need to probe Mr. Chidambaram. The CBI also makes the argument that you also heard Salwan Khurshid making, that this was a summary note. It doesn't help, or it's not germane to our investigation in any way. Is this a setback for you?
What setback? In fact, it's a setback for them because these are ridiculous arguments. The court will never accept it. First of all, let me say the CBI didn't say we will not investigate Chidambaram.
But this note is not a
No, they didn't say that either. What they said is that we have completed our investigation in which we have considered all these, and this is now this Supreme Court cannot give relief to Mr. Swamy when he asked for a CBI inquiry. That was the argument they used. Now, the quarrel took place with the central government because the central government, union government said that yes, we will examine the documents brought on record by Mr. Swamy and we will have a status report also filed. That was an extraordinary statement and the CBI reacted very well.
So you're saying the CBI and the centre actually ended up deferring in court. What do you make of that?
Absolutely.
What do you make of that?
Well, the CBI is fighting for its reputation. What will happen if tomorrow the CBI inquiry is ordered? The CBI will look, the reputation will look mud. In fact, tomorrow we are considering whether we should have a SIT in view of the CBI's rather shoddy investigation. They have not looked at any of the documents which would bring Mr. Chidambaram on for a person who has to be at least interrogated.
Nirmala Sitharaman, the Prime Minister, says two interesting things as he lands back in turbulent weather in more ways than one. He says it's the opposition that wants a midterm poll. He also talks about other forces, doesn't elaborate on what he means by these other forces trying to destabilize the government. Subramanian Swamy, did he mean you?
No, he meant somebody inside his party.
So you're saying it's internal sabotage
Yes.
that he was referring to when he said other forces. Yeah. Nirmala Sitharaman, on the charge that the opposition is trying to force a midterm election on the country.
Somewhere I find that he wants to avoid answering the focused questions that we've been raising. The Prime Minister probably is evasive. He doesn't want to specifically say that the questions that have been asked by the opposition as regards how the finance minister had changed his mind and without his clearance, as per the decision taken by the cabinet 2003, without the consent of the finance ministry, 2G couldn't have been allotted at all. And in whatever which way they did, if they had not taken the concurrence of the finance minister, it couldn't have passed through. Then the third thing, that Mr. Raja and Chidambaram had a consultation between the two, and the two together went to brief the Prime Minister. Till now, what was the impression being given out? That there was no minutes kept of this meeting.
Yeah.
Subsequently, information regarding the contents of what was discussed have also come to the public domain. So the specific questions that we are asking, for which somebody, I would ideally think the Finance Minister, then Finance Minister, or the Prime Minister should have answered both, either in the House or in the House and together with it outside too. And today the ruckus in the Parliament, JPC, proves that only selective material is being given.
So the documents have not been presented, and of course the Finance Secretary has been summoned again by the JPC tomorrow.
Summoned again, that is. And in spite of all this, I think we are focusing quite a lot on the note, rightly so. But then what it does say is nothing new. All this has always been in the public domain, specifics of which have been raised periodically by all of us. And therefore, I would think, instead of going too far to say somebody is destabilizing my government, I would think the rift between the two ministers is sufficient to destabilize their own government. And
well, that's also what Mr. Swamy, Dr. Swamy is suggesting.
Probably Dr. Swamy is suggesting a lot more than that. But what I'm trying to say is, it is no good for us to be told now that Mrs. Sonia Gandhi is trying to sort out this difference between the two. That is a small issue. We in the opposition
don't care about
nothing at all.
Okay.
We want the government Prime Minister and the Finance Minister
to answer these
specifically
specific
answer these questions.
All right.
And of course, the legality of things will be checked up in the court for that side of things.
Let me take this to Sushil Kumar. Mr. Kumar, many people believe that in a sense you did a kind of about turn in court today. You can clarify that because your client has been maintaining all this while that his detailed correspondence with all of the key players in government up to the Prime Minister makes the point that everybody knew. The government is turning back and saying, well, there were differences of opinion on policy. We did not know that he was subverting that policy. That's how they're seeking to draw a difference. You had initially wanted Mr. Chidambaram to be called in as a witness, and you said it was for the court to decide whether the Prime Minister needed to be called in. What are you saying today?
You see, I have been arguing in the trial court that he should be called as a witness under section 311 because CBI, in spite of knowing in 2010 that his name has surfaced in the evidence, did not examine him for 1 year. And now they are saying we are not going to examine him, so the only option is to call him through the court. But in the trial court, I have not taken any turn in the Supreme Court.
Okay.
I still maintain that he should be called as a witness because he knows the facts and circumstances of the case.
So not as an accused, unlike what Dr. Swamy is arguing, you want him to come as a witness.
That is his area. He wants to add him as an accused, that is his choice. So far as his complaint is concerned, I am the only accused, that is my understanding.
Yeah.
But I am not still served with that part.
Okay.
I am facing only the prosecution of the CBI. When he succeeds, how he succeeds is his hard work.
Why do you believe that he must be called in as a witness and why only him?
Today,
my question would be then why have you not extended that to the Prime Minister?
No, I have extended it to both. You have not fully heard me. I have said first...
You said let the court decide on the Prime Minister.
No, first you call Mr. Chidambaram because the document which he read today in court and is fully endorsed, and I have been using the document in the trial court, the file which contains it, that file is suppressed for the last 2 years. By the CBI. CBI has got 1,35,000 pages, but it is released only 80,000 pages, rest are kept by them. Now, if Mr. Chidambaram comes as a court witness and the questions are asked about this meeting, and if he says, yes, Mr. Manmohan Singh was also present in the meeting and this decision was taken, this is not a sale of licenses, then he's bound to call the Prime Minister
Let me put to you, before I go to KT Sosi and Dushyant Dave, Subramanian Swamy, what Salman Khurshid argued in that earlier interview. He said that often within a government there are disagreements on policy. He gave an example of the current sports bill. He said it's playing out in public. Land acquisition playing out in public. He said similarly on this particular policy there were recorded differences and then sometimes you let the minister go ahead. He said that there is a difference between a difference on policy and a subversion of that policy. How do you implicate the other players in the subversion of that policy?
Well, there is no subversion of policy. There was only one policy, and that was what Raja...
But he didn't implement that, honestly, is the allegation. Is the allegation?
No. Raja was from day one, he went through with a certain policy which he said had this backing and that backing, which is all rubbish. The real question is, any policy can be questioned in a court of law. If the government in making that decision doesn't consider the alternative policies, and this is exactly what the former Finance Secretary, Mr. Subbarao, told the Public Accounts Committee, which is a deposition on oath, that we did not do this calculation.
So you reject the argument that the policy per se cannot be judged?
Yeah, that's rubbish. That's a rubbish argument. I'm surprised that a man of the learning of Salman Khurshid should come out with this. It shows they are pretty desperate.
All right, let me take that to Mr. KT Sosi and Dushyant Dave. Mr. Sosi, to you first. As a lawyer defending Sanjay Chandra of Unitech in this case, we're hearing in the last 48 hours from several defense lawyers that given that new documents are surfacing, it proves that all the evidence is not yet out. But others are arguing that this is just a way to delay the trial, to delay the whole process, and that this particular note is not germane to any of your clients. What do you say?
Well, I say that this note is an important revelation, and it's a revelation in the sense that all the pros and cons for the purpose of adopting a particular policy seem to have been gone into at every level. And if they have been gone into at every level and thereafter consciously a policy is decided by the cabinet that in this case there need not be an auction, the entry fee need not be raised, and the social objective is more important for the nation, and therefore you must concentrate on tele-density and affordable prices. So if that was the objective, that objective has been served. And I don't see, in fact, if this doesn't demolish the CBI case, this note, it
Why does it
substantially
demolish the
weakens
CBI
the
case for you?
Because
Why, Mr. Tulsi, briefly does it
because-
demolish the CBI case for you?
Because the policy which is adopted after examining all the pros and cons. This note is actually a chronology as to who said what, and it only shows that the government took into account each and every opinion before adopting a certain policy, which overwhelmingly was in the larger interest of the public, and particularly the rural and the poorer sections of society.
Okay.
And if that's the policy,
Yes, got you.
you
You're
can't
saying...
really say that, and I completely disagree with Mr. Swamy, although I hold him in very high esteem, that you can challenge the policy. You may be able to challenge the policy, the correctness of the policy by way of a writ petition, but adoption of a policy which has been on the basis of all the inputs that you have got can never amount, in my opinion, to a criminal offence.
All right,
it can't amount to a corruption.
We'll put that to him. Dushyant Dave, it's interesting that the same note has been interpreted in two completely different ways. One by Mr. Tulsi to say that this actually demolishes the CBI case because it shows that there was a unified sort of consensus within the cabinet on this approach to spectrum allocation. The other argument being made by the opposition, by people like Subramanian Swamy, is that it actually shows that the then finance minister could have stopped this scam from unfolding if he had intervened at the right time. What does it say to you? And what do you make of the Prime Minister, in a sense, transferring focus today on the opposition wanting to force a midterm poll and even talking about other forces not elaborating in destabilizing the polity? Dushyant.
Well, there are two ways of looking at it. First and foremost, if you proceed on the assumption that the government has a right to frame a policy and give out its largesses in the manner that it has done in 2G spectrum licenses case, then I think it's the end of the matter. Then nothing is left. You pick up any newspaper, Barkha, on any morning, and you will find hundreds of advertisements by different departments of government trying to sell off all kinds of things by inviting public tenders, even if it is old ambassador cars. So I am not prepared to accept this argument that yes, they could have done, given away these licenses on first come first basis. If you accept that as a policy, I think you are sounding a death knell of democracy, because then governments will go on doing it, in every conceivable manner. The fact is, Supreme Court has for last 30 years said that if government wants to deal with its largesses, it must do so in an open, transparent manner, and that method is public auction. So I don't think there can be any two views about it. The fact is that we are today dealing with a very serious issue of a criminal conspiracy, and a criminal conspiracy which has resulted in a serious loss to public exchequer. In that context, what is to be done? And this is where, there is something which is very seriously missed out by CBI, and I must point out to you, which is this, that the government of India's, transaction of business rules actually oblige Rule 4. And this is what it says, that the Ministry of Finance, no department shall without the previous concurrence of Ministry of Finance issue any orders which may inter alia involve any grant of privilege in respect of any concession. Now license is a privilege, it is a concession. It also says that otherwise, if there is any financial bearing, whether involving expenditure or not, the consent of Ministry of Finance is a condition precedent.
So you're saying
these rules are framed. These rules are framed under the Constitution.
You're saying
can't
the policy.
therefore give.
Yeah, got what you're saying. You're saying the policy per se is where the problem begins. But Mr. Kumar, if I can get you in on that briefly, and Nirmala to respond to that, because we've got to go for a break. Your client has also got up and said that the BJP's Jaswant Singh headed the group of ministers when this policy was first decided. So is the policy per se the problem?
Well, policy not to auction, which was approved by Jaswant Singh GOM in 2003, has continued till date by all ministers, whether it is BJP or the others.
Which is my question to Nirmala Sitharaman, that if you focus so much on the policy and not on actually how the policy was implemented, then aren't you scoring a self-goal? Because Mr. A. Raja and many other commentators are taking this back to the BJP's tenure.
Absolutely no issues for us. Jaswant Singh is happily and Arun Shourie have both said we'll voluntarily come and give any explanation. But the question there is, what policy, after all, did Mr. Raja finally follow? He didn't follow. My argument is he didn't follow any policy for that matter. Neither was he faithful to the 2003, nor was he faithful to any particular tribe.
That's what I'm saying. That isn't the issue. There is subversion of the first come, first served.
No. The policy itself,
Or
even if you want to talk about the way in which the policy was being followed, why was the note between the understanding between Mr. Raja and Mr. Chidambaram made into a note, and then they both went to orally brief the Prime Minister? There is a discord, and the letter of the 15th by Mr. Chidambaram saying that, you know, whatever has happened, close it as a chapter closed, treat it as a matter of chapter closed, need not be said if at all there was a policy followed.
Okay.
He very clearly says, you shut this, but from now look at auction. Okay. That itself is a giveaway.
All right, we've got to take a quick break. On the other side, if A. Raja's lawyer argues that this is a policy that was also followed by the BJP, what is the difference? Does Subramanian Swamy think there's a difference? We'll take a quick break. Also, where's this case headed politically? Final comments on the other side. On the buck stops here, final comments now. Can the UPA weather the 2G storm? Let me take this back to KTS Tulsi. Mr. Tulsi, you've heard contrary views to yours, including by Dushyant Dave, making the point that when it comes to scarce natural resources, you cannot defend a first come, first serve policy. That very approach in itself is problematic. Quick last word on that. Mr. Tulsi.
No. There is no such absolute bar. Otherwise, the government will never be able to adopt a social objective or serve a social objective. How do you give, how do you determine the food prices, and how do you give subsidy for fertilizers? How do you give subsidies to the FCI? All these social objectives
that is
have
to benefit the farmers,
concern,
not benefit, not give benefit to Ambanis and Tatas.
Here is the benefit of the common man, the rural India, the poor India. That's the benefit which was sought to be conferred on these people. That they should be able to have telephonic services which are at affordable prices.
But let's look
and
ahead.
I also don't buy this argument.
I've got your point, sir. I'm sorry, I have to speed along here now because running out of time. Dushyant Dave, very briefly, Mr. Tulsi is maintaining the same argument that the government is, that this was needed for tele-density, that you had to benefit the consumer. Very quick last response, looking ahead. What do you believe the government needs to do at this point?
Barkha, first and foremost, let me tell you one thing, that, you know, undoubtedly the telecom companies who have got the licenses have really partially sold their licenses at exorbitant prices. Now, despite that position, they have been able to provide consumers the same services that Mr. Tulsi speaks about at affordable prices. So really speaking, it is not that the services have been affected. If that money had come in the kitty of the government, it would have been used ultimately for the benefit of the country at large. So this argument is really,
you know, money has come for the rollout
the case nowhere.
Obligations.
Secondly, let me say one more thing.
Yeah, very quickly.
You know, the decision of a civil servant under the judgment of Supreme Court in Samshed Singh's case, which is a 7-judge bench judgment, is a decision of the government. This decision on the note is a decision of the government. Nobody can say that, you know, wish it away by saying that it's... Now, lastly, what I feel is that government, it must do, if it really wants to redeem itself, as I have said more than once in the past, government must go out, cancel the licenses, forfeit the license fees, re-auction, and see, ultimately, you know, you are going to get 200,000 crores perhaps in licenses. So
you're saying that's the only way to redeem?
If Tata's license value alone is an indicator, because Tata has sold its 26% license at 13,000 crore, which means Tata's license is worth 51,000 crore.
Got to interject there. I'm really out of time. So very, very brief 10-second last comment. Sushil Kumar, to you first.
Tata is not an accused, even if it is made 14,000 crores. And regulator today also says no auction. Even today, regulator has said no auction. How do you accuse anyone
What is Mr. Raja's line of strategy going to be now?
About what?
About his own defense. Is he going to say, is he trying to say if I'm wrong, so is everybody else?
Whatever he did was in public interest, and that is protected under the PC Act.
All right, Nirmala Sitharaman, on the point that BJP's own ministers have followed this policy, quick last word on that.
Very clearly, if for a minute we wanted to talk about policy makers, you don't have to question. if the NDA time finance minister has been questioned for having framed a policy and to get more information from him, I think it is only proper for the minister, the finance minister, without whose consent this couldn't have been given away, to be interrogated. And for a free and fair interrogation, he cannot continue to be a minister and have that questioning being done, because today he's a home minister.
Okay.
And the people who are going to question him are all going to be poor little IPS officers
So
who cannot
conflict of
face him.
interest.
That's one second. Third, and the final one, I won't take much of a time on this. It is important for the government now to not evade answers. These are issues which are coming up repeatedly. Till now we thought it was only an alliance partner who was doing it. Now the coalition is also on corruption. This government cannot evade answers.
A quick last question on the Prime Minister's little gauntlet thrown today. Are we looking at a midterm election?
I am sure that midterm election is inevitable, because Mr. Chidambaram will have to face questioning, and that means he'll have to resign, and that means the Congress party for the first time gets into the scandal. So far it has been DMK and dismissed off like that. The second aspect is going to be very serious, and which has not been discussed yet, because that's my next petition in the Supreme Court, and that's the national security angle.
Okay.
There was a Home Ministry advisory that licenses should not be given, no foreign investment opportunity
to two particular companies.
To particular companies, and they were given, and it was given on the advice of Mr. Chidambaram, according to Mr. Raja on the file.
So the last word has not at all been spoken on the story yet. We'll have to leave it there right now. Unfortunately, the last word on this program has been spoken tonight. Sushil Kumar, Nirmala Sitharaman, Subramanian Swamy, KTS Tulsi, Dushyant Dave, thank you for your time. By these other forces trying to destabilize the government. Subramanian Swamy, did he mean you?
No, he meant somebody inside his party.
So you're saying it's internal sabotage
Yes.
that he was referring to when he said other forces. Yeah. Nirmala Sitharaman, on the charge that the opposition is trying to force a midterm election on the country.
Somewhere I find that he wants to avoid answering the focused questions that we've been raising. The Prime Minister probably is evasive. He doesn't want to specifically say that the questions that have been asked by the opposition as regards how the Finance Minister had changed his mind, and without his clearance, as per the decision taken by the Cabinet 2003, without the consent of the Finance Ministry, 2G couldn't have been allotted at all. And in whatever which way they did, if they had not taken the concurrence of the Finance Minister, it couldn't have passed through. Then the third thing, that Mr. Raja and Chidambaram had a consultation between the two, and the two together went to brief the Prime Minister. Till now, what was the impression being given out? That there was no minutes kept of this meeting.
Yeah.
Subsequently, information regarding the contents of what was discussed have also come to the public domain. So the specific questions that we are asking, for which somebody, I would ideally think the Finance Minister, then Finance Minister, or the Prime Minister should have answered both, either in the House or in the House and together with it outside too. And today the ruckus in the Parliament, JPC, proves that only selective material is being given.
So the documents have not been presented, and of course the Finance Secretary has been summoned again by the JPC. Let's get started with our panel this evening. Can the UPA survive the 2G storm? This on a day when the Prime Minister has accused the opposition of trying to engineer and force a midterm poll. Let's introduce our panel this evening. Subramanian Swamy. He's been, of course, the key person in this entire case, who's petitioning in the court asking that Mr. Chidambaram's role be probed in this. Also with us, Nirmala Sitharaman. She's a BJP leader, spokesperson for the party as well. Also with us in the studio, Sushil Kumar, lawyer for former Telecom Minister A. Raja. Also joining us, KTS Tulsi. He's representing Sanjay Chandra of Unitech in this case. Also joining us, Dushyant Dave, senior advocate with the Supreme Court. Let me start with you, Subramanian Swamy. The CBI says in court there's absolutely no need to probe Mr. Chidambaram. The CBI also makes the argument that you also heard Salwan Khurshid making, that this was a summary note. It doesn't help, or it's not germane to our investigation in any way. Is this a setback for you?
What setback? In fact, it's a setback for them, because these are ridiculous arguments. The court will never accept it. First of all, let me say the CBI didn't say we will not investigate Chidambaram.
But this note is not
No, they didn't say that either. What they said is that we have completed our investigation, in which we have considered all these, and this is now this Supreme Court cannot give relief to Mr. Swamy when he asked for a CBI inquiry. That was the argument they used. Now, the quarrel took place with the central government, because the central government's union government said that yes, we will examine the documents brought on record by Mr. Swamy, and we will have a status report also filed. That was an extraordinary statement, and the CBI reacted very
So you're
badly.
saying the CBI and the centre actually ended up deferring in court. What do you make of that?
Absolutely.
What do you make
well,
of that?
the CBI is fighting for its reputation. What will happen if tomorrow the CBI inquiry is ordered? The CBI will look, the reputation will look mud. In fact, tomorrow we are considering whether we should have a SIT in view of the CBI's rather shoddy investigation. They have not looked at any of the documents which would bring Mr. Chidambaram on for a person who has to be at least interrogated.
Nirmala Sitharaman, the Prime Minister, says two interesting things as he lands back in turbulent weather in more ways than one. He says it's the opposition that wants a midterm poll. He also talks about other forces, doesn't elaborate on what he means.